Hello everyone, welcome back to another Helm to Tower video. We're sort of in this waiting period mode to hear more about the next update to Wayfinder. We have gotten a small preview and knowing that is kind of focused on performance updates and kind of optimization of the game, which is definitely something that's been needed for a little while. We know the console version for my console players out there is getting a quality and performance mode in this next update, and we're also getting some UI changes, weapon balances, and all that stuff. So I think it will be a pretty good update for the game, even though it might not come with new bosses or content to kind of chew into. That stuff I think will be for updates coming after that, but I'm still looking forward to this update coming out pretty soon here. But I thought in the meantime, while we're still waiting around to hear more about it, I would do something a little fun here and do a weapon tier list. Now, I will definitely not proclaim myself as the master of knowledge on everything. I'm sure there are other content creators even, or you can definitely go into the Wayfinder Discord and find the people who are pushing the limits and are following in the numbers and doing all the stat readouts to figure out which weapon is the most optimal for this and that. I'm just kind of here to give you like the fun vibe check factor of like, I've obtained every weapon you can get in the game currently, and I've gotten pretty much all of them to level 30. I've awakened some of them. I've been slowly doing the awakening grind because it is a pretty big grind currently in the game due to drop rates and things like that. But I've pretty much used all of them, and I kind of tried to focus on using them alongside Wayfinders that exemplify those weapons. So when I was leveling up a sword and shield, I had it on Windgrave. When I was leveling up guns, I was using Silo or Venomous. When I was leveling up daggers, I used Nis. So I kind of always try to use the character that kind of brought the most out of the weapons, because they are built around those with those weapons in mind. I have been dabbling a little bit more outside of that realm, like using like two-handed swords on Windgrave and daggers as well on Windgrave, and also doing some dagger stuff on Venomous, because I know I've seen a bunch of people doing that as well, and it is pretty fun. So I definitely been dabbling a bit more, so I'll have more thoughts on certain weapons I've been doing with different characters in that regard. But mainly I've tried to focus on using his sword and shield with Windgrave, because he is designed around some of that play style of having his sword and shield, and having that. I feel like I can give some better thoughts about what each weapon is capable of and not. But yeah, this is just gonna be for fun. Don't take what I'm gonna put at top tier. Definitely will not be always things that other people will agree with. I'm sure that won't stop some people from trying to roast me in the comments or whatever, even if they somehow come along this video and are Wayfinder fans. But yeah, let's get into ranking some of these, and let's see what you guys think. So the first ones I'm gonna start with admittedly are ones I've kind of used the least, and that is because I just think they need a little bit more work. And those are the breaker weapons. Those are the two big two-handed axe, more centered weapons, that being Typhoon, Eclipse, and Juggernaut. Those are kind of your two-hand axe adjacent breaker weapons, I think is what they're used for. I predominantly use these on Senja, and just did not find these super fun. I just think they are intentionally very slow for the power that they have and the hit power they have, and the break. I know they're centered around having a lot of break power built into with your echoes and whatnot to kind of get the most out of them. I just feel like that trade-off is still not fully met. I think they could use a little bit more oomph and some of that stuff, if they want to keep them slow but heavy hitting and able to break enemies really well. Also with we have Typhoon, which is kind of your very basic starter weapons. So that's already going to be kind of lower, because you can't awaken those weapons as of right now. I think there's talks and hopes that they might go back on that and make those weapons you can awaken at some point. Granted, these are also weapons you can just buy directly from the store, so I understand why they maybe thought that was not the way to go with them, because they are much more easily obtainable compared to some other weapons. But yeah, you just have these the four starter weapons. I definitely think will ultimately be not to get too ahead of myself, but they might be a bit lower just because of that factor alone. But Typhoon was definitely even out of those four starting weapons was the weakest to me personally, just because it felt really slow, and has a little bit less stats going on than some of the other breaker weapons, and To be fair, the other 2 breaker weapons also kind of have some buggier or like harder to land unique attacks with like, Eclipse has like a big axe throw that you like spin it, which is cool conceptually, and I think it could be really good, but I think it's just kind of bugs out a little bit right now how it's currently set up, and I hope they kind of maybe rework that a little bit to be a little bit more smoother. Juggernaut's a similar thing where it has to be like you have to be very like on point with it, because you kind of have this like charging dash and then you like leap up and slam with it. Looks cool and feels like cool to like try and perform, but can be a little bit wonky sometimes to try and land. So these 3 weapons were definitely kind of weaker on the end for me, so I'd probably put this all the way at the bottom. This is probably where I'd throw these at currently for breaker weapons. Again, I think they can be pretty fun, and I think the idea of having like these slower but like harder hitting weapons is a good idea, and differentiates them from some of the other two-handed options. So I think I think they're going in the right direction. I think they just need to kind of fine tune these to pack a little bit more oomph and make sure the abilities are working correctly. Next up, probably some of the weapons I've used the most, just because I play a lot of Wingrave, and that is swords and shields. Swords and shields, they definitely started off, before the 0.2 update, were definitely felt a little lacking, although I still enjoyed the playstyle of them. I definitely think they've improved them quite a bit with the update in 0.2, because they're just hitting a little bit harder. They attack faster. So they feel pretty good overall, but I definitely think there are some that still feel a little lacking compared to like some clear, very strong outliers. Those being, I think the 2 big ones being the best swords and shields by far are Bastion and Tooth and Claw. Bastion and Tooth and Claw, like it's just, some of them come down to like their stats and mainly both their abilities. Tooth and Claw, even with its ability is a little bugged out, because you have it basically you throw the shield like a buzzsaw and it pings between enemies and does a bunch of damage. That can be pretty inconsistent with how it hits enemies in its throw, because sometimes if you're too close to an enemy, it won't register it going to that enemy and it'll kind of whiff it, which can be a little bit annoying. But even with that aspect, when it does hit, it hits really hard and is like definitely a really strong contender for like a damage weapon in the game, like across all of these weapon types. So I think, once they get that fixed and it's more consistent, like I easily think Tooth and Claw will be like one of the best weapons in the game, because you also have the inherent nature of swords and shields where you can just put the shield and pretty much block the majority of attacks in this game across the board from like bosses and any kinds of enemies. So I think Tooth and Claw is going to be super strong once it gets fixed, so I'm gonna put it in A tier for now. Bastion, again, was the other one I mentioned, is like probably one of the strongest swords and shields, because this just has a massive AoE heal burst, and I think like the more pips you have, the stronger the heal is. Even at lower pips, this is still like I think one of the strongest instant heals in the game across the board, which is like super strong. I know there's a lot of people will make the criticisms of like there's not a lot of content in the game right now that warrants having this much healing power, and I generally agree with that. Like I think there is definitely like some if you go into like Sphere 4 like higher tier enemies like Reaver King and Wormwood and like some other bosses, you might need a little bit more of that there, and I can see the viability of it within a team of people. So I think this weapon is one that's like already really strong, and I think it's gonna get even better going into the later game stuff. Like we know we're getting mythic hunts coming soon, and we know we're getting raids in Q2 even in a couple months, and that content is going to be end game content. It's going to be pushing the difficulty up, or ramping up the difficulty at least. We don't know to what extent, but I think considering it'll probably be much more harder than what we've seen so far, like Bastion will obviously be a very high up contender to bring into these. It is a weapon that is already like I'm considering like, yep, this is like probably has to be in a team setup for these things potentially, or a lot of people are at least going to bring it in because it seems like it could potentially be very useful in these scenarios. So for like that factor alone, I'm definitely putting it for myself at S tier. I think it's going to be easily one of the best swords and shields in the game. After that, We have Legacy, Grim Harvest, Radiant Dawn, and Vanguard. Again, Vanguard's in like a similar weird spot in not being able to be awakened. I think that's like going to be a tough one to rule out because its stats are like naturally going to be lower than all the other weapons now because of it being unable to be awoken and getting its stats increased and stuff. It is a starter weapon, but I do like its skill a lot. Having that just instant shield bash to do a bunch of like break damage on an enemy is still just pretty fun to hit. So I think from like a baseline, it's still pretty fun, even though it's going to be a little bit lesser. I'm going to just kind of, I'm going to put it a little bit lower though, because it is still unable to be awakened. Legacy, I think, is also an extremely good sword and shield. I'm going to put that at A tier because I think it also has like a shield that you can use on your allies to negate damage for a period of time. And that is also super strong. And I think there will be tons of opportunities for that and like different kinds of content for like, you know, using that, timing that shield with some kind of big burst attack from a boss or other kind of enemies and things like that. Could be very useful in a lot of harder content where, you know, staying alive will matter much more. So I definitely think it'll be a good contender for high-end game and later game content once we start seeing that stuff. Radiant Dawn is one I like conceptually and I think just looks cool. I think it's like one of the cooler looking swords and shields in the game. I like the idea of its ability where you're just like doing a big boost of attack power and it like transforms your sword into a big glowy sword and it buffs your allies and stuff. So I like that kind of team play concept there. I just think it needs a little bit more, like I said with some of the other weapons, needs a little more oomph because I feel like that damage buff does not feel as impactful as I think it should in some respects. So I'm hoping maybe they take a look at that one again. Grim Harvest, I'm gonna put low pretty there personally. The big AoE kind of like slam is like okay. I feel like when I was using Grim Harvest and doing that move, it felt like it kind of like you took the flow out of sword and shield kind of comboing and attacks when you pull off that move. So it felt a little off, but you know, it's not a bad weapon by any means, but like I think just for me, for my personal tastes, I kind of preferred a lot of the other swords and shields. So there you have it, there's all the swords and shields. Let's move on to the two scythes that are in the game. We have Bloodsong and Epitaph. Again, I mainly used these two scythes on Kairos. I was leveling him and leveled these two scythes as well. I think Epitaph feels really good, especially with Kairos. I think it could be interesting with some other setups. I definitely want to try using it with Nis because, you know, Kairos and Nis have similar kind of big damage bursty play styles, and I think Epitaph can like fit in with that playstyle because it builds off of the things those characters can do with their intrinsic like arcanist stuff. So I want to mess around with it more, but baseline with Kairos, it felt pretty good to use, and it flowed well with like with the like scythe swinging combo strings where you can like kind of leap into an engagement with that ability, do a bunch of damage, and then kind of keep comboing right into it. Felt just like smooth to use with Kairos, so I really like that. Bloodsong is another one that like I really want to like, but I think the ability it uses feels like looks cool because you basically like send the scythe out in front of you and it does like a quick swing. If it's landed on enemies, it'll drain the damage will be converted into health for you. And it's just a cool looking scythe. It's like one of the coolest looking weapons of the game. I just think the weapon ability feels a little bit lackluster in its current state. So I really hope, we know we're in this February patch, we're getting some weapon balance tuning. I really hope this is one they touch up and kind of look at again and hopefully give it some much needed love, because I think if they're able to make that ability feel a bit more impactful, have a little bit more like maybe a little bit better lock on to enemies, that I feel like it could be like one of the strongest weapons in the game and will be really good for characters like Kairos and Nis because they don't have a lot of healing, and those and the size already kind of fit well with their play styles. So I think that could be a really strong combination that I will definitely want to play and try out if they do buff Bloodsong. Let's move on to the guns. There's lots of guns in the game. So I'll try and get through these a little quickly here. Basically, I would say in a similar vein, Ransom, which is the kind of base starting rifle you can choose. Has similar, again, the issue I brought up before with the other ones where like can't be awakened, so like it's already going to have lower base stats. I feel like again, it's a starter weapon, so like it's only going to be as good as it can be, and the ability is like basically like a shotgun kind of burst like thing that like hits in front of you. Fun to pull off and looks like nice, like a nice animation and everything to it, but I think it's just like a pretty simple weapon with that kind of stuff, and I just think there's a lot more. Obviously, the weapons you're going to go chase after to craft are going to be more interesting, probably by design to an extent. So, and I definitely feel that here, where I just think it's a little weak. A lot of these other rifles are pretty awesome. I do like the burst rifles, although they can feel. There are times when they feel a little like you're plink plinking, and they don't hit. I feel like they could hit maybe a little bit harder than they do. Like I definitely feel that with Voidbinder specifically. Voidbinder is one that I'm like, I like it conceptually because you kind of have the charge up attack, and it's basically just like a big burst damage thing. It's similar to Arcstorm, but it feels a little bit worse than Arcstorm because it is this burst rifle archetype that just kind of is a slow, fires faster, but it does a lot less damage. I don't feel like it does too much like in any respectful way other than that one burst move, where you have something like Arcstorm, which I would also consider like, easily one of the best weapons in the game right now especially in terms of rifles, because, the base shots, although it's slower than most others, hits harder than anything in the game. Plus it has a similar skill where you do like a big burst shot, and it does a ton of damage. It's just really, really satisfying to use because it has that slower kind of effect of building up and then looping into using that full attack. Like I mainly use it on Silo a lot because it already hits really hard, but then you can stack some crit stuff with Silo on top of that, and you're just doing high amounts of damage like very, very well with that combination. So I really like it. Another burst rifle, Nightshade. I like as well. I like mainly how it looks. I just think it's a cool looking like rifle that's in the game. It's obviously Venomous's signature weapon, so I mostly used it on her, and obviously it pairs very well with her because the burst rifle has the three burst shots, and then you can stack poison with it as well. So I think it pairs very well with that. But outside of that, I think it has like a similar problem to Voidbinder, where just the 3-shot bursts just feel a little weaker now since those changes with 0.2, and I think they maybe reined it back a little too hard, because now they definitely feel a little bit like you're plink, even just basic fodder enemies you're just plinking at for a little bit longer than I feel like you need to personally, as they are right now. But the skill in itself, where it does, you kind of pop and it does like a super rapid fire dump of the clip, is a fun one, and again, it fits well again with that venomous loop of getting poison applied to enemies. So it works really well with her, but with Silo I didn't really feel it was as impactful, so we'll have to see how that goes. Long shot similarly was the other end, where like obviously it's more centered around Silo's playstyle with getting higher crit setups and stacking that stuff up a lot. And I think it works well with the rifle, but then you have kind of the more basic ability, which just adds a bunch of like the crit spots on an enemy. I think that's like okay, but it's also like pretty basic in a similar way that Nightshade can feel. And also like again going in that other direction, where if I use this on Venomous a little bit, and it did not really feel like it really benefited her as much as it did Silo. So I feel like it just kind of felt like a middle of the road sort of thing. Last two, we have our shotguns. Obviously, I think anybody who's played this knows Tempest is still also one of the best guns in the game, arguably. It's like most ease of use, like it is the easiest weapon to recommend. Like if a new player is getting into the game and I see like in the Discord or something, and they go like, hey, what's some weapons I should go for first? Like Tempest is like top of the list, because it is like a pretty early game weapon you can get. It's super strong and like hits like a truck, because it does a lot of break damage on top of also just damage by itself. The super ability is like a big auto fire shotgun dump. The more you stack up those pips for that, and like it just feels really good to pull off. It plays really well on both like gun focused characters, Silo and this, because with NIST you're able to fire it all fast enough where you're stacking up a bunch of poison while hitting super hard with a shotgun in their face. Scythe obviously can stack a bunch of crit damage, so you're hitting crits with this all the time. Using the shotgun on both of them is like super powerful, so I really like it. Next up, I know some people in the community I've definitely seen feel low about Hellswarm. I actually really like Hellswarm now that I've used it a bunch. Mainly I use it on Silo because I really like the versatility he then gets with like he just has like multiple abilities if you build him out right to just be like an AoE ad clearing machine through dungeons. I feel like I go into helper queue with this and I'm just like clearing out dungeons faster than a lot of other scenarios, just because I can throw bombs into a crowd, kill like a bunch of dudes with the oil bomb fire combo, then I can shoot a little bit, and then I get my molten meteor attack with the Hellswarm, and then I can just clear out a bunch of other fodder enemies. And then obviously I have the super as well on Silo, so he just has like a bunch of AoE ad clear stuff with all three of these things combined with some of his abilities and the weapon ability on Hellswarm. So I think it's just like a fun combo in and of itself. And also, again, with Silo, you can stack a lot of crit damage stuff, and I think that can make up for, maybe you not having, compared to Tempest, because you're probably going to compare both shotguns, you at least get a little bit more damage out of the base shots of Hellswarm thanks to crits, and you have a lot of ad clearing potential with the meteor attack. So I think it still could be improved a little bit. Again, it is because it is a Pyre Talon of Pyre world boss weapon. I think it should be a little bit more potent than it is, and I feel like I think they already did say, even though they changed this ability again, which I think the raining meteors was not its original ability when it first came out, but I think they're changing it again even more to like kind of fine tune it. So I think if they could just, make it a little bit more, make the meteors maybe a little bit more powerful. I think it easily will quickly become one of the best weapons in the game. But I already think it's already pretty powerful now, especially with Silo and using it with Silo. All right, two-handers here. These are weapons I enjoy quite a bit. I mainly used all three of them on Senjo with Senjo when she got reworked. And it feels really good with her. I have started dabbling with using Wingrave with some of these now, and I like that as well. So let's talk about these. First up, Titan's Bane. Oops. Even after it's a nerf, which admittedly I did not use it too much before it got its initial nerf to some of its damage. I know like it was not really like a nerf. I think it was more like a bug with the weapon is how they put it. Even I think regardless of that stuff, and like I'm sure you can go watch videos and see how crazy it was. I think it was like something to do with like its ability, like stacking damage way more than it should have. Even with all that stuff in mind, like using it now in moment-to-moment gameplay, like it feels still pretty strong. I wish the ability of itself had like it feels very narrow right now, because he kind of hit that one lava spike, and like in most scenarios when you're fighting a boss, it can be super potent depending on the boss you're fighting and the size of the boss. It can be like really strong, but in like when you're doing like random little dungeons or using it in expeditions and stuff, it can feel a little bit lacking when you kind of miss that. You miss that kind of lava slam attack, and then you see the thing whiff off, or like maybe accidentally. I play on a controller, so maybe I accidentally like move my controller stick just like slightly off angle, and then it, like last second diverts the flow of the attack, and I just whiff it, which can be a little annoying. So I think they can fine tune the Titan Bane ability a little bit more. But I still think even with those little minor issues I have, it's pretty strong. I like it a lot. Colossus, I'm gonna put kind of low here, because it personally I just didn't really have as much fun with this two-handed sword as the other ones. It kind of has this like 3-sword kind of combo, and I think it's supposed to, it's Senja's signature weapon, so I think you're supposed to kind of combo it with some of her like punching and charging abilities to kind of get the full extent of it. Even doing that, I still really just did not feel like it was worthwhile to like go for all these swings. I really just kind of would use it like other weapons, or the weapon we're going to talk about next, know where that one stands, but like it just does not feel like its combos are like hitting hard enough to like warrant it like charging up that full way, where I can just use like a single swing on a crowd of enemies and still get away with it, rather than charging it up all the way to like, you know, have this full combo swing to pull off all at once on like a bigger enemy. Like, it does not feel like it hits hard enough to like warrant charging up for all that stuff. Also, I just think like visually, you know, most of the weapons look awesome in this game. I think this one looked just like a little weird to me, and it's like one of the first times I got a weapon was like, oh, let me put some skins on this and try some other stuff. But yeah, overall, I think they could do another pass on some of that, some of its ability stuff with like trying to hit the 3 combos, make it maybe worthwhile to like charge all 3 swings to like hit in succession for a lot more damage or something like that. And I say that because the other weapon, Windmother's Fang, easily the best two-handed sword in the game right now, because it does pretty much everything Colossus does, but better, and does more damage, I think, than even Titan's Bane ability in like one fell swoop. And like, you know, it basic combos hit really hard when you get your ability, your combo ability charged up pretty quickly, I feel like, and compared to the other ones. So maybe that's how I wouldn't be surprised if they make some adjustments or tuning to this to bring it down a notch or two, because it feels like you just charge that ability up super quick, and then you just can pop off this, like, you know, basically just does like an instant combo effect for you, depending on how many kind of like parts of the meter you've charged up for your ability. And then you just, you know, you go to town, and it does a lot of damage. It can break enemies fairly easily as well. And just, yeah, feels really strong. I easily think it's one of the best two-handed. It's easily one of the best two-handed weapons in the game, and definitely in terms of melee options. Last set of weapons here I got for you. These are the daggers. I got these last 6 daggers here. Easily the best ones here are Knight's Edge, which is Niss's signature weapon. It feels really good on her to use, and popping up those 3 kind of floating daggers above her head, and then it kind of does a bunch of piercing damage. Super strong. Obviously, it synergizes with her super well, and zipping around and pulling those out. As well as I was also messing around and using these on Wingrave, and it felt really nice on Wingrave too, because it just gives him a lot more. You have all the healing of Wingrave and sustainability of Wingrave, plus now you have, you know, these daggers that just do a lot more damage, hit a lot more harder with him than compared to like a sword and shield. So that combination felt really good. I definitely think they're the best pair of daggers in the game at this time, and just feel good to use. I like their the synergy they have. Other than that, we have the Venom daggers. Put them under that just for me personally. I know a lot of people really like them. They especially combo well with Venomous. I have admittedly not used that combo too much. I probably will in the near future just to try it out, because I know a lot of people really like it, and seems like a pretty strong option for damage dealing across the board. So I'm sure once I mess around with it, I'll be like, okay, yeah, this is really strong. But I've not. But I know a lot of people like it, so I will put it there. And even without using them in that vein with Venomous, I used it on Niss, and it still felt just as strong there. So I definitely think they're a really good pick for that. And they're pretty easily obtainable early on. You will have to go fight Night Maul in the Highlands a bunch, which can be can be inconsistent with some of its drop rates, and just hopefully having other people around to help you out, getting worm bait provided and that kind of stuff can be a little tricky. But I think they're relatively easily obtainable early on. So I think they're like a strong early contender as well. Base daggers, I will actually put middle here, because I think the weapon ability itself is still really strong. I like the kind of more AoE effect it has, sending kind of these little like knives out in all directions from your character, and like having that kind of crowd control on a set of daggers. Like, doesn't really have, there's not many other daggers that kind of have this. So I think it's a really good setup there. Next up, Harvest. I think it's Harvest Moon. I believe that's what it's called. I don't think it's called Harvest Moon. Double check. Yeah, it is Harvest Moon. Yes, I was right. I think these are also really good. I like them. I just think they look cool visually. I think they're personally the coolest looking daggers across the board. I think they're very fun looking. They have a nice ability where you kind of are kind of, you know, setting damage types, or being able to like do more damage to certain types of enemies depending on what you do. It can be really good for like some burst style damage with Niss for sure. So I really like these as well. I definitely will be also one I try on Venomous, and maybe even Wingrave as well, to see how they feel on those characters. I like them quite a bit. Next up, Rose and Thorn. Admittedly, probably my least favorite daggers personally. Not to say they are like that. They're like not like they're pretty strong. All things just daggers in general are just very good. But I do think they also they're mainly the ability just feels like it's a little bit tricky to hit. The character just kind of does this wind up leap. You have to leap into an enemy to like land it on them, and when it does, it does some pretty decent damage. But I think just that kind of wind up and leap feels a little bit unnecessary for like what it can do at the moment. So just felt a little weird with like, you know, again, kind of it reminded me a little bit of the Grim Harvest effect, where it kind of trying to hit that ability kind of takes you out of the flow of doing combos with the weapon itself, and you kind of have to like stop and kind of like, you know, figure out where you're gonna hit with this weapon rather than, you know, kind of flow it into your combat. That's where it kind of falls apart for me. And then lastly, I think they're called, I forget the name of these daggers, the Umbros daggers, that's what they're called, I remember now. These ones are pretty good as well. I will honestly probably put these in a similar case with these. Admittedly, since they're the newer set of daggers, I've not used them as much as some of the other ones here, but I did like them when I used them. I like the kind of, again, it has sort of almost AoE ability where it does, you kind of do all these like slash attacks around your character, and it has a pretty good range, so it feels good to pull off, and I think it has a pretty strong use case for that kind of style of play. Felt good on this. I'll be curious to try it on other characters. I think that could be interesting on and I'm thinking about it on like Venomous or somebody, like, you know, doing that ability, you know, having a more AoE effect. Maybe I'm gonna try. I think I also want to try Kairos and some daggers as well soon here, and these are ones I'm thinking about trying on him. So, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking for these. So here you have it, guys. This is my current tier list for Wayfinder weapons in the game as of, this is end of January 2024. These are all the weapons that are currently available in the game, ranked. For my personal tastes, again, I'm sure, you know, people will obviously disagree with some of these choices or generally agree. Feel free to let me know in the comments. You can roast me in the comments, it's fine. I set myself up for this, making a tier list, so feel free to let me know what you think of the weapons. I also will link this tier list maker I made down in the comments as well if you want to make your own and share them wherever you want to share them, or make your own, show it off. That's gonna do it for this video, guys. I'll be back soon enough here once they give us some more details on the next patch update. I'll probably maybe do some before and after comparison stuff, because they're gonna be doing some optimization patches and things like that. We'll see if the time I have to make some videos works out that way. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks again for watching. Yeah, and I'll see you next time.